When the first female showed up, Caleb Morrison was 6 feet down in his own tomb. He dabbed at his perspiration with his hands were covered with dirt. The shovel shook in his hands, and the Texas heat brutally pounded his aged face as he ate. 42, he decided that this was how it should go, standing in the hole he had been digging for 3 hours straight. Alone, forgotten, interred in the same desolate place where he had lost everything. The wooden cross he had crafted bore plain words, "A man who gave up his name is lying here, and no one is left to remember it." However, a shadow fell across the edge of the grave as he lifted the shovel for another scoop of red earth. Then another and 5 more tiny individuals stood in silhouette against the afternoon sun. Their faces obscured, but children's existence is indisputable based on the appearance of their ripped clothing and tangled hair. The youngest was only 6. Caleb's, and the oldest could not have been older than 14. He had seen exactly 0 guests in his 3 years of living like a hermit on this deserted property when the shovel froze in mid-stride. A grown man, much alone children, could be killed by the 15-mile journey to the closest town, Mr. the tallest girl. Despite her slight trembling, she spoke steadily. "We need your help," she said. Caleb narrowed his eyes at them. He was having trouble processing what he was seeing. These weren't town kids taking a walk. Their clothes were ripped and dirty. The youngest daughter held a rag doll, while the oldest girl's sleeve was smeared with dried blood as if they had been running for days. "How the hell did you get here?" he growled, his head dangling by threads, and instantly regretted what he had spoken. "We walked," the leader said plainly in front of the kids, "for 2 days, through a desert devoid of water, shade, or compassion." Caleb sensed something that had been frozen solid since the day he had buried his own family began to fracture inside his chest. But he pushed he was depressed, didn't want to worry, couldn't afford to worry, and was expected to die before sunset. "Well, you can't." He gripped the shovel more tightly and yelled, "Stay here. This is private land and I'm busy." She didn't ask questions, wise child. The girl's gaze dipped to the grave and then returned to his face. She said, "They'll murder us if we go back?" The words struck Caleb in the stomach. Murder them these were, although they weren't criminals. The dread in her voice was genuine and terrifying. That resulted from seeing real evil. He looked more closely at their faces, finding cuts and bruises on the youngest's arms. These females weren't lost. They were fleeing on someone else's defensive-looking hands. "Who's attempting to murder you?" He asked himself, but instantly regretted it. "The men from the orphanage," the leader said. "They believe we witnessed something we shouldn't have." Caleb's heart stopped. He had heard about an orphanage. Like as those institutions where undesired children vanished and money was exchanged. For no good cause wanted to think that the tiniest girl began to cry, a sound that pierced the desert quiet like a dagger. With the experienced ease of someone who had been guarding her, the oldest instantly knelt next to her and whispered consolation. Caleb saw the dust cloud on the horizon moving quickly after others had been there for much longer than any child should have to, approaching his ranch directly. The leader girl noticed it as well, and her face turned white. "They found us," she said. Caleb gasped as he glanced at the riders coming up and then at the 5 frightened kids standing next to his half-dug cemetery. All of his instincts told him to send them away so he could return to that pit and complete the task he had begun. But the oldest girl's eyes had a desperate bravery that made him think of someone he had lost a long time ago. The cloud of dust was approaching. Whatever evil these kids were fleeing was going to reach his doorstep. And all of a sudden, Caleb Morrison had to decide whether to fight for what he believed in or die as intended. The sound of hoofbeats reverberated over the desert, getting louder every second. Something worth living for halted as Caleb gazed at the riders approaching, his thoughts running more quickly than the pounding hoofbeats. "Go inside the house," they said. He yelled at the females as they clambered from the grave, but the oldest girl was the only one left. Seized his arm with her unexpectedly powerful little fingers. "You don't realize that they have legal documents if they'll take us back if they find us here, and you'll be accused of kidnapping." The word kidnapping struck Caleb like a sledgehammer. He no longer merely saw terrified kids. Instead, he saw a potentially devastating legal nightmare. Given his limited life, he asked, "Why did you come here?" "You're the only person Miles knows who isn't related to them," she uttered frantically. "The mayor, the sheriff, the adjudicator, they all robbed Mr. Thornton of his money." Thorne, Caleb recognized that name. Silas Thornton, the owner of half the territory's enterprises, was well known to everyone in 3 counties. Caleb could now count the hoofbeats in every shady transaction, from claim jumping to livestock. Rustling, like guys who are confident in their abilities, the 4 motorcyclists moved quickly but not hastily. Authority, he hurriedly asked the girl, "What's your name?" Emma Thorne, not Thornton, yet close enough to make Caleb feel queasy, a family bond, or just he pointed to the other girls gathered behind Emma, saying, "Bad luck, little ones." The voices of sisters Mary Beth, Lucy, and Alice Emma cracked a little. That's all, where the words had a weight that caused Caleb's chest to constrict. The writers were now close enough that whatever had occurred to these females had robbed them of everything else. Caleb could see their features. They were hard men with harsh eyes, dressed in clothing that suggested they were wealthy, and Authority, the leader's deputy badge, gleamed in the sunlight like a menacing warning sign. "All right," Caleb said. He seized the shovel and began, his choice crystallizing with sudden clarity. "Here's what we're going to do." His movements were hurried but controlled as he quickly filled in the grave. "Emma, take your sisters to the root cellar. Keep silent no matter what you hear, because there is a secret entrance beneath the old wagon behind the house." "What about you?" "I'm going to convince them that you were never here," Emma said, but Caleb knew it even as he said it. Wouldn't be that easy. He didn't think these men were the kind to give up lightly, and if Emma was correct on their relationships that supported their search with legal authority, the girls vanished from the residence as the riders ascended the little slope that surrounded Caleb's land, forcing himself to continue shoveling while acting like a guy. "Nothing unusual here, just filling up a hole." The deputy pulled up about 20 feet away, close enough to speak. His 3 comrades dispersed. In a loose semicircle, their horses snorting, but close enough to pull his gun if necessary. And scratching the dirt in the afternoon, the deputy called out in a tone of phony civility that made no one believe me. "Caleb didn't stop shoveling, and we're searching for some escaped kids. Deputy Marcus Webb hasn't spotted any kids." 5 girls, ages 6 to 14, escaped while Webb kept looking about the property. There don't get many people out here. Caleb finally stopped digging and leaned back from the Thornton Children's Home 2 days ago. "As I mentioned, I haven't seen anyone." Webb's smile was all teeth and no warmth, and this is private land, by the way, when we met his gaze on the shovel. "Possess the authority to search any property within a 50-mile radius. These kids are regarded as hazardous." Little girls were scared and in danger because the deception was so ridiculous that Caleb nearly burst out laughing, but the deputy's hand resting on this wasn't a joke, as his pistol but indicated. Caleb's question was dangerous since they saw something they shouldn't have when Webb gave him a warning glance. One of the other writers responded, "Looked at anything, Emma's." Caleb remembered the words. "They believe we saw something we shouldn't have." The fragments of an extremely unsightly image were beginning to come together, and Caleb didn't like what he saw. These weren't police officers searching for fugitives, Caleb remarked. These were cleanup men sent to silence witnesses. Webb nodded to his men, saying, "Please feel free to look around, but do it quickly because I have work to finish before dark." Dismounted and set out to scour the land, moving with the diligence of seasoned hunters, making sure that